Jeff, Jeff, Jeff. Jeff, 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 Jeff. Jeff, Jeff. Jeff, Jeff. Jeff.
Jeff Stein's our national and presidential expert, noted author. You can find his books where you find your books. Also, the Iowa Business Report, the Iowa Politics Report, come to us from his mothership, KXEL, Cedar Falls, Waterloo, which is so appropriate for Mother's Day. Hey, Jeff.
Wherever you find books.
Where you find books. I love those little libraries. You know the little libraries?
The little free libraries?
I love those, man. Those are great. You might find a Jeff Stein book in there. You might.
Yeah. Yeah, go on the eBay. I did that the other day. That was entertaining.
Okay. Jeff,
Matt,
you and I, we don't necessarily run political campaigns. But if a candidate...
I hope not.
What
did I do to you to suggest that I would have that as a vocation? I mean, I'm probably already going to a warm place. I don't need that.
You'll see where I'm going.
Right.
If a candidate came to you as an advisory position and said,
Yes.
hey, should I tell people about the worm that was in my brain? I think that my first thing was, no. Oh, God, no. No. Bad idea. No, don't do that. Your thoughts on sharing with everybody that they had to take a worm out of your brain?
I am finding it interesting in the past few weeks that the individuals who are rising to the top of the political heap, the ones we are looking to potentially run the free world, we have the option of worm died after eating part of my brain, or I have a gun and I'm not afraid to use it on four-legged creatures oh my goodness. Here's the thing. Has Mr. Kennedy released his medical records?
Well, I think it's that cartoon book where the worm's driving the Apple car. It's on its way here.
Well, here's the
Scurry, isn't that the guy, the author? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm Richard Scurry.
Yeah.
That's very nice. I'm imagining an apple. I'm imagining a worm with a big smiley face, perhaps a top hat, jumping out of it. If Mr. Kennedy was releasing his medical records as part of the I'm a candidate, you need to know everything, all right. Otherwise, this seems like an unforced error.
It seems a little bit.
What was the question that would have led up to that? Have you had any parasitic invasions in your cranium, candidate Kennedy? What?
It's not a usual one. I mean, maybe OAN, but I mean, I don't think that's usually at top of the mind.
But again, it's sort of like the number of times, Matt, I have seen on social media today, and I did it with you when I sent you the link to the article. Not that you wouldn't have seen it, but it allowed me to say, well, this explains a lot.
Yeah, it kind of does. You know,
I mean,
I know
my goodness.
It might not be the COVID vaccine. It might be the worm in your head. I'm no medical professional here, but you know,
now, did the COVID vaccine kill the worm?
Well, I don't. Well,
perhaps.
No, it was 2013.
His life.
It's 2013, and he's like that one character in Total Recall, where it's a creature that lives in my belly. Look, there you go. It's a little friend. You can take it everywhere you go.
As I've mentioned on this bi-city radio program, I've met Mr. Kennedy. It was probably 20 years ago.
Was it at the fishing and tackle store? Never mind. I'm sorry.
We were at Bob's Bait and Tackle.
He took
over near Cherry Lake in Kama.
He took a stumble, and next thing you know, into the worm bucket where it's a buck for a handful, and next thing you know, we've got a problem.
Now, wait a minute. Buck for a handful. I didn't think we were off on the Trump case yet.
No, wow, there you go. Nicely, bravo. Nicely done.
You're welcome. I've spent most of the day alone here. Can you tell?
But if you have a worm in your head, you're never alone. Sorry.
Do I have to buy 2 seats on the plane?
It is the textbook definition of unforced terror because, I mean, you and I, what we're doing, can you imagine what the late night hosts are about to do to this guy tonight?
Well, and again, I met him briefly. He was running an environmental group. He's, seemed, I don't know, like he had his wits about him. I don't know. But again, that was before. Yeah, it was definitely before the worm. The worm was 2013, you say? Yeah, this was before the worm. So that could explain an awful lot.
Moving into the more vertebrate category of people.
By the way, okay, so let's say you are, what was her name? Samuelson? I'm sorry, I just totally forget. The woman who infused capital into the campaign and became the running mate.
Oh, I still have no idea. I can't remember. I keep trying to remember who the vice presidential candidate for him is. San Francisco. She's out of San Francisco. She's got, she has money. That's it.
Seems quite accomplished. And, but I'm wondering at that point, do you pick up the phone and say, did you think to tell me about the worm before I signed on and wrote you a massive check? Did you think to mention the worm in your brain? That's one scenario. The other scenario is that he did, and she still signed on.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which is worse.
Well, when he did introduce her, he said that she was going to be the person that's going to bait his hook. So, it's...
Again, you're back to the trial.
Of course we are. Of course. Actually, I want to go to Trump, but I want to actually go to something.
There's a shock.
Yeah,
I'm stunned. I'm glad I was sitting down.
Speaking of worms, anyway, there you go. Hello. The ketchup worm has shown up again. So I want to go back to something you and I have talked about repeatedly. The primaries for Republicans. Yesterday, Indiana, traditional Republican state. As a matter of fact, it's one of the more conservative states. Yeah. Well, what the Republicans have done there is that very effectively used Gary, Indiana against the Democrats in the rest of the state. And so it is a deep red Republican state now. Yeah. Yesterday, Donald Trump failed to get more than 80% of the vote in the primary. Nikki Haley took another 21 points from him yesterday. You and I have continued to talk about this. This is not going away. Biden, by the way, was uncontested in Indiana. I don't know if that meant everyone withdrew or if it just no one else tried to get on that ballot. But he ran unopposed, so he got everything. But Trump here, once again, losing over 20% of the vote in a Republican stronghold. And it's not so much whether or not, will some of those guys go back to the fold? Of course they will. But if 5% of the Republican base says enough's enough, he's in real big trouble nationwide.
You cannot have a conversation about Biden's troubles without also talking about Trump's troubles, right? Because neither one of them can afford to shed votes. And Trump is the one who, based upon the certified election results 4 years ago, is in the worst position. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's an odd situation because you, in essence, have two incumbents running. Contrary to what you're going to tell the audience, I was not covering politics for the second Cleveland run, so I cannot tell you firsthand.
Go Tap.
But it does come down to you've got two incumbents running, and each has a track record, and there's a sizable portion of people within each's home party who expresses displeasure, and how many will come home. And I have to think if I was forced to say, I think more of the dissatisfied Democrats will come home than the dissatisfied Republicans. The key for the Republicans as a party is do enough show up for down ticket races, Congress, etc. Because again, you have more Republicans in the U.S. Senate than you do Democrats, but Democrats have the working control. You have one vote majority, and you have to rely on sizable amounts of Democrats to save a Republican speaker in the House. I mean, neither of those are functional chambers. They're the definition of dysfunctional. And so there's a lot of worry among state party chairs, I would tell you, Matt, about the down ticket impact.
Well, and you and I talked as well about this new thing with Trump, where basically you have to send him tribute If you mention him on your web pages, if you mention him in your campaign, part of your donations, he wants that to go to them. He just was at I think it was this weekend. He had a fundraiser, and people were getting photographs with him at $40,000, and he was saying we should be charging more for it. He's now coming up here to Minneapolis in a week from Friday for the Minnesota GOP's Lincoln Reagan dinner. And the first thing I say is, well, how much of the money you're raising is going to go back with him? Because he's going to demand a good chunk of that. That's probably part of the condition to get him up here for that event. What's that?
Do you have a GoFundMe page set up to pay for your photo with Mr. Trump?
No, no.
I would kick into that. I would kick in so that he's got the frozen stare with the thumbs up, and you're wearing an orange shirt. I would kick in for that.
I would wear the Gritty outfit. I would look like the Philadelphia Flyers mascot Gritty. I would wear that and sit right over here, Donnie. And don't think for 1 second that if that guy thought he was going to get money from me because of that photo, all right, let's smile. Love your googly eyes.
I love the fact that you are broadcasting from the Twin Cities and you're in Chicago, and you brought in the Flyers mascot?
Well, Gritty is Gritty.
Are you nuts?
Gritty
are
is
you
Gritty.
Completely nuts.
Yeah, that is Gritty. Well, okay, but he basically there is a toxic side of this, and we'll spend the next segment here talking about yesterday, because that did not clearly help him. That whole thing, being reminded of that he was trying very hard to keep all that under wraps. You got the fact that 20% of the party, even in his best states, and this is the surprise about Indiana is this isn't Ohio or even Iowa. This is a pretty safe Republican state, and the fact that 20% there, it'd be like 20% in Kansas going against him. If he's sucking away every dollar from any other campaign, state, Senate, House, whatever the case may be, if he's basically guaranteeing that he's going to lose 5% of the Republican vote he got last time, at some point here, I know they keep screaming that they're doing so much better, but there comes a reality that you and I, as we pay attention to these politics, we can see that something is not adding up here, and the Republican Party has got a big problem this November.
I don't want to torpedo our weekly visits from now through November, but the reality is this is such a unique fact pattern on all sides. Anybody who suggests that they know what might happen, we're just blowing smoke, because the reality of the situation is the congressional dynamic is fascinating. The national dynamic we've never had in the current era.
Testing.
Sorry about no worry about that. Sorry, that was me. That was my stomach. Anyways, that was the worm in my. That was the worm in my.
I was going to say I don't have a worm, but I see something
back in there.
Is that your worm, Matt? Or are you just happy to see people? Look, the thing that is interesting is how the Trump team is now mobilizing. Now, I was told earlier this week, it's probably not for public consumption, but what do I care? They are moving people out of states they think they have well in hand. One of them is Iowa. So in other words, the Trump base in Iowa is going to move to Omaha Council Bluffs. Why is that? Well, they're close enough to still do some things in Iowa, but what are they really moving to Omaha for?
For that one state that basically has the electoral votes separated. So
they know how close it's going to be, that they cannot afford the single electoral vote from one congressional district. And so they're moving the chess pieces over. That's got broad impact, because first, what happens if all of a sudden these places where you think you're safe, your base erodes? You don't have the troops in place, and it's going to look bad. The other thing is, if you're trying to, as a state party, mobilize your voters, do you really want the top of the ticket to act like the race is over? I don't think that helps, but it does bring us to the point that these state parties, these candidates, They're on their own. They're in their own life raft, and they're not going to be able to count on any help.
And I'm not making speculation. I'm just looking at these numbers, and I just say, okay, I've seen this before, and this does not generally work out. We'll take a break, come back. It's Jeff Stein on the Matt McNeil Show. Broadcasting in the evenings on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, and in the afternoons on AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota. It is the Matt McNeil Show. Jeff Stein joining us for his usual visit. And I will say this, you're right, every election is unique. But, there are some telltale signs that there are problems, and just to plow over the fact that even now that this is over, the Republican nomination is over, and still 20% of the vote is saying going out and intentionally going to a primary, which it doesn't matter at all, and still saying, I'm still not there. Like I said, all it takes is 5% of the Republican voters to say, I'm not there, I'm not going to vote for him. And not only is it going to be a big, Trump's not going to win anything, but the Republicans across the border, and it's going to be like 1932.
All right, I'll give you what I assume the talking point spin is. You check your fax machine, because I know the RNC sends memos to you every day, but I'm sure that the talking point is dissent is good. Look, they got this out of their system, and now they'll come home and all of the, that's what you say, but what else would you say in that situation? And there's nothing else to say.
And you and I both agree, most of them will go back to the fold, but it doesn't take many to make this a big deal. Yesterday did not help Trump. And, yes, there's the salacious details of Stormy Daniels hitting the stand and talking about in detail about this, which once again, Donald Trump has bragged about this happening. He is basically, but when it comes to, legal matters, he says it never did happen. The fact that she went through such detail about it, it was fairly, it was historically very significant.
Well, you had a juror who turned away and put her head in her hands to not have to listen to when a juror. Now that could cut both ways.
It can.
Okay, but the bottom line is, and this is something. This is the lawyer in me. There really was no reason to have her testify because to the details of the act, because it's a documents case, and this is all I'm saying. Yes, it served its purpose to, color it a lot. Yes, court of public opinion, huge embarrassment for him. But did they give him an appeal issue?
Well,
because they tried to block the testimony, and the judge even said from the stand, all right, this kind of went a little farther than I thought it might.
But that was the next thing he said right after that, which is your defense team did not object. They could have a lot more. And I would have sided with you the entire time. And you guys just sat there, and he criticized. He said, because I think part of this, the prosecution had a point to bring her on there to establish the act. Understandable. Don't have to go into the details. You can establish it. Stormy Daniels definitely wanted to share the details. She kind of just saw that she had a forum, and she wanted to go out there, and I think had to be reined in quite a bit, particularly by the judge. And I think, in the prosecution got chewed out a little bit. But it was one of those things where when the judge looked at the defense team and said, why did you guys not object? I would have let you object. I would have upheld your objections. You guys just didn't do that much as you could have.
Here's why. Has that judge given them anything yet?
Well, the fact that Donald Trump's not after 10 violations of a gag order, if you and I had one, we'd probably be spending a night in the pokey. So the fact that he's given him 10 and still is basically just wagging a finger at him, that's it.
This show alone is going to land us in the pokey. But the point is, let's say I object, the jury's going to think, why are they objecting? They must have something to hide. You don't object, in theory, if you think the judge is not going to side with you because you don't want to make it seem like a bigger deal. But to your point, if you're trying to preserve an issue on appeal, you have to make the objection.
Exactly.
You have to do something to prevent it. And the judge had a no-lose situation at that point. He says, I just sustained your objection. Well, yeah, easy to say now, Judge. But again, sometimes I wonder who's sitting there with the law license next to the defendant?
Well, and I know this much. I think there actually has been court precedents, cases where they have said, well, I didn't object because I didn't think the judge was going to go with me. You can't do that. They won't allow you to. Well, if you would have objected, like you said, you set the pattern. I don't care what the jury says, because at this point you're trying to get it thrown out. And so
you can't have that both ways. You can't say this jury is so biased against me that we'll get it overturned on appeal, and then not make your record for appeal. It just didn't. It's not helpful. It was not a helpful move.
Well, Trump today, it's Wednesday. They're off. He could be out there. He's basically he's only doing an event at Mar-a-Lago. It sounds like from Maggie Haberman and some of the other people that cover him on a regular basis that one. That left a mark. Well, okay, sorry. It left about the testimony. He clearly, I think there's some elements of it. I can't believe he's feeling pretty good about, his sleeping situation with Melania being outed by Stormy Daniels. But the reality is the fact that enough people have seen her and him together that it becomes, yes, there are some things that he said, she said, but at the same time, it's, it clearly the damage has been done here.
If you're him, forget the campaign part. Let's just forget the campaign part for a moment. You paid for silence. That's totally legal, by the way. You paid for silence. That was not silence. I mean, what's the point of all these non-disclosure agreements? I mean, what's the point of all of this? I mean, he's sitting there thinking he had it all boxed in. Now, granted, she's got all of these sworn letters where she said nothing ever happened, and now she's contradicting herself on the stand. Well, that can be explained away much easier than some of Michael Cohen's things. But of course, I mean, the embarrassment, we've talked about Teflon Don. This is not Teflon. This is a scratch, and the eggs are sticking to the bottom of the pan.
Well, and you and I, we've never seen anything like this. I mean, we've never seen. I mean, presidents have had affairs. I mean, Harding had a ton. Grover Cleveland had a ton. I mean, they all have had them. It's just
with Cleveland, I wasn't there. Yeah, exactly. I don't know.
But I will say, you get this situation where it's just the historical nature of this: a former president and the current Republican nominee in court having his bad behavior just laid out there for everyone. That was. I mean, there are going to be history. There are going to be people talking about this one for a long time yet.
Well, and again, Clinton Lewinsky, we all cringed, okay? But it was a different situation than what you're seeing here. It was not in a criminal courtroom. Whole different thing.
Well, and it will be interesting. Like I said, we got to look at that. You and I right now, we have to look at that 5%. What does that 5% of the Republicans do? And I don't think this helped him at all. Jeff Stein, once again, find his books at your favorite bookstore, and we'll, of course, talk to you next week. Thanks, Jeff. Bye, Chicago, Minneapolis, St. Paul. Hour 2 up next.